You're listening to Puma Podcast.
Welcome to The Imaginable Workplace, where we explore how we make work better. I'm Carl Javier, CEO of Puma Podcast, an award-winning podcast production company that aims to spread the joy, power, and value there is in listening.
And I'm Jackie Cañiza, founder and managing partner of Haraya Coaching. Rooted in wholeness, Haraya supports individuals and teams by creating brave and safe spaces for transformation.
In this episode, we're talking about leadership, particularly the first times that you step into leadership. And so, Jackie, I know that you are at the head of a company and you have occupied a number of leadership positions. Can you talk about making that jump into your first leadership position?
It was just one person when I was first assigned a leadership role in my first job. And there was a sense of responsibility of now having to look at somebody else's work apart from mine. I think that you lose a sense of control somehow in that. And I'm a very control person. So I think I had to make a few blunders in that first leadership role to learn a little bit more.
When you say you lose a sense of control, why?
I think one of the challenges that new leaders have is this: I'm not doing the work myself, and if somebody else does it, it's not going to be done as well as if I were doing it myself, right? You want to do it quicker, you want to do it better, you think you can do it quicker and better. Might not always be the case, but that's what you imagine. I'm the leader and therefore I must be better at this. And so if someone doesn't do as well, I might as well just do it myself. I think that's a real struggle for many, many young leaders.
So,
Did you struggle with that, Carl?
No, but only because ito, my background, I played in bands and I can't sing and I can't play the drums. And so I do not need a sense of control for something to happen well. And that is why, as a leader, I know my limits. I fully embrace that there's going to be somebody who's better at it. There's always somebody more skilled. So I'm constantly trying to find my positioning. How do I put myself in a spot where I can make a contribution? And so even when I wasn't leading, I was trying to find my quote unquote, I'm trying to find my spot. And I do think that that helps me to let go. That's why I'm so intrigued by the concept of control, because I think that's a thing that a lot of young leaders struggle with. Knowing that they can trust. Kasi yung control nakakabit sa trust, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The reality is you can't control. It's something you'll soon realize when you're dependent on the outcome or the work of somebody else. And so letting go of that control requires that I give that person a level of trust that they will get the work done properly. And if I don't trust, what do I end up doing? I'll end up micromanaging. I'll end up checking in all the time. I'll end up asking about step A, B, and C and trying to gain as much control as I can. And that is not showing trust at all. So you're right. There's a very, very direct link.
I'm so interested in some of these behaviors that you talked about, yung micromanaging, checking in all the time, checking in on the person, all of this stuff. People always complain about bosses who are like this, no? Yan yung mga big reklamo.
Yeah.
Ito na naman siya, kukulitin na naman niya kung nagawa, tinatrabaho ko pa. So the root of that is them trying to make sure that you're doing the work, no? But that is not necessarily healthy. So how would you guide a new manager, a new leader? What would you say to them, or what are the things that they should watch out for so that they don't wind up becoming a meme of a manager?
A meme, no? Yeah. Well, especially when thinking about what to delegate and when to delegate, I think there's some questions that a leader can ask. First is, what's the level of urgency of this task? is it really urgent or not? And if it really is, then maybe you'll go to your fastest worker. Then another question to ask could be, what's the level of risk of this particular task? Would you give something to a new person or a less experienced person if there was a lot to lose for the company and for the business? Maybe not. But if it's low risk and low urgency, then you can give it to someone who's still learning and give them a little bit of leg room to make mistakes and to grow from it, coach them through it, etc. Those are some considerations I think that you could ask yourself. Obviously, there's no one size fits all answer. You really have to be aware of each of your team members' strengths, their weaknesses, even their aspirations, what their motivations are. Lots of things that you should consider as a leader in leading your people. Getting to know them well is, and cognizance of their strengths is one of the first things.
So I will share. I have a mentor, and he's been calling me out for essentially not knowing how to delegate because it's very difficult, especially when you're in a small company
It is.
and you have gotten used to doing things. And so I wanted to walk through each of these things first. One is yung urgency and
Mm.
assessing when something needs to come out. So it's very clear if you're a young leader, kapag nagmamadali tayo, you feel like you need to be the one to do it. Is there any benefit to not being the one doing it?
If you're not necessarily the best person, you're not the most competent. I mean, you can imagine that you are, but
Right.
sometimes your team member might be more functionally competent than you, especially if it is something that you've kind of stepped away from for a while now, right? I remember when I used to handle HR in corporate, right? There's so many facets to HR:
Okay.
recruitment, compensation, labor relations, all of that. I would be a fool to pretend that I was an expert in all of those areas, right? So I knew who was my best person in every functional area. And when something is urgent in their area, they're my go-to for sure.
So yung level of urgency and knowing in the team who can do it well.
Yes,
Right.
absolutely. The capacity and the strength to do it, right?
So these are questions, but so our questions are what is the level of urgency? What is the risk? Who has capacity and who would benefit from learning from this? It's a set of questions that we can use to assess, but they can move in coordination when we're trying to decide whether to delegate or not, right?
For
So,
sure.
for example, nagmamadali na, it's 4 o'clock and we need this by 5. Even if this isn't my core competency, I'll take it. But in an ideal setting, we would have planned it better. It would have gone to someone else. What is the risk of not doing this well? We need to close this account. And I need to make sure that my hands are on it. Right? Versus, ah, if we don't do well, this is just an introductory email. So I'm sure that somebody else can do
Mm.
it. Who has the capacity, meaning na we've already assigned this person a bunch of work. I can take this one, right? But if that person has free capacity, meron siyang 40 hours a week, tas 20 pa lang ina-assign, edi dapat siya instead of me na I'm filling up my plate. And then the last one is who would benefit from learning from this. I think that's really a time-based opportunity. I want to jump in on that one just because I've
Mm.
learned that every time that a leader or a manager does something themselves, they deprive their team of a learning opportunity.
Oh, I so like that perspective. Yeah. If only all leaders would think that way,
And
right?
and yet I struggle to delegate. I'm saying this on this recording, while also knowing full well that it is not easy when you know exactly how you want it executed and all of that, and you have to be able to trust that by handing it off, somebody else can do it better or they can learn from it.
Yeah. The funny thing is, and I make this mistake too, right? I imagine that without me and my input and my hands on the stuff that are happening in the workplace, things will not be as great as they
Mm.
could be. And then one thing leads to another. I have to go on vacation, I have to go on sick leave or what have you. You come back and you find that things got done and they got done well. So,
That's the best. When you realize that
right?
you can just take it.
Yeah, and that can be scary too for someone, right? Because then you start to think, okay, what's my value then? So there's another aspect, I guess, aside from control, of wanting to contribute and add value in such a way that I'm taking on the role of others, and getting it to that extent, right? Because I want to be valuable, I want to be important.
I think this is the point where I flag this is an opportunity for managers to go wrong because they want to be seen as important and relevant. If suddenly work is happening without them, they become insecure about their position and then they start adding new layers, new approvals, new things to, hey, make sure I'm involved in this thing to make sure that everyone knows that they are in charge. And actually, things moving swimmingly means that you're managing well. Huh? I wanted to bring it back to another metaphor that I like to use, which is when you watch an orchestra, the conductor isn't playing any instruments. And I think
Yeah.
that at the highest level of leadership, you are no longer playing an instrument. At risk of it sounding weird, you're playing people, right? It's the people that you're not holding an instrument and you're not playing the note itself, but you have a vision for what this needs to be and you are communicating it moment to moment. And that's sort of the highest form of leadership, I think, when each person on the team has been communicated with beforehand. People make fun of the conductor all the time, right? Ano ginagawa niyo dyan? Like he's just like waving a baton. Like that person is unnecessary. But actually, everyone needs that cue of when to come in and when to go out.
I love that analogy. I think the orchestrating work
Mm-hmm.
is such a great way of describing the role of a leader. What I also imagine in that is if you're a conductor, you also have a sense of what is happening to the whole team,
Mm-hmm.
right? You have that kind of perspective. Because if you're
Yes.
playing an instrument, maybe you don't see the whole picture. Maybe you
Yes.
don't see what's happening in all the other places, but the leader or the conductor does. And so they're making adjustments along the way based on what they're seeing with everybody else. Yeah, so good. That's very powerful.
And then trust then across teams. But you have to trust that that other team knows when they're coming in and hindi mo rin sila pinapakialaman.
Yeah.
There is one thing that brings me to this, which is the feeling sometimes that if you're the leader, you need to know all the answers. So yeah, you're here, you're conducting, you're telling everyone.
Yep.
And it's natural to feel, especially because people come to you and they say, what should I do here? What do you do? Do you fake the knowledge? Do you pretend that you know?
You could. You could fake it. I mean,
That's
I
what
know
I do,
some people
Jackie.
who do.
That's what I do every day.
Yeah. Some people will say, you fake it till you make it.
Uh,
Um, I'm a big fan of leaders who can be vulnerable. People see that you are human. Yeah, there's a lot of humility involved in that.
I have a question there, Jackie. People often conflate vulnerability with weakness, and they don't want to
Yes.
be seen as a weak leader or someone that they can be taken advantage of. They want to show a sense of control that they
Yep.
know how to run the show.
Yep.
How do you differentiate vulnerability, which is good, from weakness, which is bad?
Well, I don't know. I'm going to challenge that perspective, right? A weakness is not necessarily bad. I don't know of any leader or any person who does not have any weaknesses at all. We all have our share of stuff that we do well and stuff that we don't do very well. Being aware of those weaknesses and asking for help for those particular areas that you're not so strong in is to me, I mean, that's very vulnerable, but also is a sign of strength because you're not pretending to be this perfect person because everybody knows that you're not perfect anyway. In fact, that can go the other way very quickly. People can see right through that. Yeah.
Because I'm trying to think of how we perceive strong and weak leadership. But like, for example,
Mm,
strong is decisive, weak is indecisive. Strong
sure.
is supportive, right? Weak is like they don't give feedback. I'm starting to see from what you're saying how vulnerability actually builds strength. If I have humility, if I'm vulnerable, I'll tell my team, I don't know what decision to make, but help talk me through my options. Versus if I just sit with this and I try and make a decision without consulting, that actually makes me a weak leader, even
Mm,
though that tries to express like I don't need the team's input. I can handle this on my own. Is that
yeah.
making sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It's being aware
Mm.
of what are the things that will be beneficial for us collectively as a team and knowing how to leverage the team for the things that need to get done. One of the benefits also of vulnerability is it does increase the level of trust among team members. If I can show you that I am involving you in decision making because I need your help, then you will trust me more as a leader.
Building trust by showing that you're collaborative.
Hmm.
So the vulnerability piece that overlaps with the quote unquote weakness piece is when you were saying sometimes there are people on your team that are better than you at something. How do we prevent ourselves from feeling vulnerable or weak if we have to go to them? For example, we're in a team and I'm a writer and a manager, but there's someone on my team who's actually a better writer than me when it comes to, say, funny scripts. How do I feel like that person won't take advantage or replace me? Because I feel like that's one of the things that junior managers struggle with. The insecurity of being, oh no, baka people will discover I might be replaced, or that guy might see my asking for their help as a weakness. Maybe they'll take my job. Like, how do you avoid those kinds of crazy thoughts that sometimes might be valid also in a toxic workplace?
I'm not sure if I know the answer to that because it sounds to me like it is a mindset, right? Um, Maybe it is about what mindset should I have
Hmm.
instead. We've talked about this before as well. It really is about an abundance mindset, maybe. There's room for all of us here. There's room for all of us to succeed. Your success doesn't mean my failure necessarily.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
think that might be the mindset that's affecting what you just shared.
Yeah, I think so too. I think the threat levels and the insecurity
Yeah.
is in place. So it's not really the activity itself, but the way that I'm approaching thinking about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what questions should we be asking if we are making the shift into leadership?
Because you're moving to a role where you have to rely on others and trust others, I think the first is to be self aware. What are
Hmm.
my own strengths? What are my own weaknesses? Based on that, really find where I can add the most value to my team.
Parang self awareness itself is a strength. No?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's one of the practices that we help leaders with. And it's usually the ones that leaders will appreciate the most. So, cognizance and awareness,
Okay.
definitely a good place to start. And then also, cognizance of your team members. What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? Kind of like this conductor that you mentioned
Mm.
earlier, right? How do I leverage everybody's strengths so that we're performing at our best collectively? and we're making the best music possible. Does that help?
We'll see tomorrow.
You'll try it out. So if you're going to start tomorrow, Carl, then maybe one of the things that you can keep in mind is thinking about how the role of a leader is shifting. And one of the mindsets that we've come across in our work is knowing that as a leader, my first and foremost role is to develop people. That's kind of the mindset I think that can get you to behave differently. If you have that kind of mindset where it is about developing others, it is not about me, then all of these things we've been talking about earlier will be easier to navigate through.
Yeah, so if we get this mindset of it's not about me and my personal performance, but my ability to drive the team, then we will move forward together, and that will help me to be a better leader. I'm Carl Javier.
And I'm Jackie Cañiza. Thank you for listening to The Imaginable Workplace. This podcast is brought to you by Haraya Coaching, a company rooted in wholeness that supports individuals and teams by creating brave and safe spaces for transformation.
In partnership with Puma Podcast, an award-winning podcast production company that aims to spread the joy, power, and value there is in listening. This episode was produced by Macy Hoven and Jen Horn, and edited by Joe Salcedo.
If you appreciated this podcast, then we're sure you know someone else who'd also want to improve their workplace. So please share this with a colleague or friend, and do give us a rating on your podcast app. It really helps get the word out about our work. And follow this show on your podcast app for more stories, data, and insights on creating your imaginable workplace.